So why is posture important for the pelvic health, and how does that come into play? Well, let's take a look at our pelvis, or this is a pelvis that's probably similar to your pelvis. This is a female pelvis, or a pelvis that has a vagina. But if this is a penis-owning pelvis, then it might be a little bit taller and a little bit more narrow. But really all of our pelvis differ in size, and even just little details. Your indentation, or the acetabulum for your femur bone, might be a little deeper, or it might be more shallow. Like, there's all sorts of differences, little differences that we may all have. But generally, this is a nice, strong pelvic structure. The pelvis is the largest and most stable bone structure in our body. And sometimes it can be sensitive and overprotective. Both can be true. So we sit on this, right? This holds our torso upright all day long and carries all of that weight. And so how we position our pelvis really matters. And we fall into our holding patterns over time for many different reasons, and a lot of it is really for safety, and that's more into the nervous system side of things. But how we position our pelvis, because it is the center of our musculoskeletal system, impacts how we hold our spine and our upper body. And you might, wherever you are now, just begin to rock the pelvis forward and back and notice how it's connected to everything else. It might change the sensation in the legs, and it changes the way you hold your upper body, right? It kind of reverberates up the spine, and you might notice as you tuck and round and gently rock the pelvis back, this is the back of the pelvis, and then it kind of allows the rest of the body, the torso, to kind of round, and this might be actually pretty comfortable. At least this is one of my natural holding patterns. So this is a pretty comfortable place for me to be. But whenever we're sitting this way, our pelvis is actually collapsed here. And this is a very common holding pattern for a lot of people. So I don't want you to feel like, oh no, I'm in this collapsed position. That sounds really intense. That must be terrible. It's not ideal, but there are little things we can do even when we just remember. Even this little shifting of the pelvis forward and back can help bring in a little bit more blood flow to the nutrients, to the tissues, the pelvic organs, and all of these things. So what can we do if we find ourselves in this holding pattern where we naturally just kind of round, which again, a lot of us do. And so I'm not the posture police. I'm not here to tell you sit up straight, pull your shoulders back, lift up nice and tall. Although that's great, that can invite in rigidity. And we don't want to be rigid either, because what happens when we're like, I can only be this way, and you start policing yourself every time you slouch, then we build in a box around, or we kind of build ourselves into a box, and we lose mobility and range of motion. Our body loves to move, and it loves to move in all sorts of different ways. Our spine can move laterally, side to side. You can even do a little side stretch with me and notice, think about bumping the rib cage over, opening up through the ribs like you're opening up a set of gills. Breathe into that lung. The other side, our spine loves this. And even twist, we can twist around. All of this is good for the pelvis, our spinal health. It's all connected. It really is. And this helps us take a nice big breath in. And our breath is so important for pelvic health, especially for getting the blood flow and circulation all the way to the pelvic floor. So as we can see, like, our spine moves in all sorts of ways, and we want to keep it that way. So it's not that this is bad and this is good, but we do want to have an awareness of how we're holding our body. Mostly, am I stuck? Am I stuck in this rounded, slouched position? Okay, let's challenge that. Baby steps too. This has been hard for me because I am this all or nothing kind of person. Once I recognize something and I have an awareness of something, I can't not see it, right? So then I'm always like, I have to sit like this and like redo this holding pattern that I've had for years because I was trying to keep myself safe. And so I made myself small and I protected my heart. And so naturally over time, my nervous system told me that this is a safe posture for me to be in. And that can make it challenging too. You might notice when you sit up tall, maybe you're in a different environment. Maybe you're sitting at the DMV and you're noticing, oh, I could practice a nice tall posture and my full breath here while I'm waiting. And it might feel a little unsafe. It might feel really uncomfortable. You might feel a little bit of resistance, and that's okay. Baby steps. And what we do when we show up in this way with baby steps at home where you're comfortable is you're telling your nervous system, like, it is safe for me to open up. It is safe for me to stand up tall, to have confidence. And I think especially if you have breast and were born with a uterus, this also might feel unsafe. You don't want to draw unnecessary attention, right? So we've kind of made ourselves small and curled into a ball to protect ourselves. And what this does when we roll, you might notice that also affects the position of your pelvis. And it's really hard to get the blood flow and nutrients into our pelvis when they're in this collapsed position. So again, baby steps. And I think sometimes we swing the pendulum the other way. We might do the big opposite of this slouching position and think we have to roll these shoulders back and really put our chest out, and this is where we are supposed to be. And although this is great in like a cat-cow situation, right, to open up through these muscles here, broadness across the collarbones, and a little gentle retraction or a pulling in of the shoulder blades together, because shoulder mobility is also a big part. It's all connected, and you'll hear me say that over and over and over. And the more you do this work with me, the more you will realize that it is all connected and it all works together. So although this movement, again, our body loves movement. There's no right or wrong way to move unless it's painful, okay? And that's when your body is giving you the red light. But we don't have to hold ourselves in this posture to try to undo this slouchy position that maybe we got stuck in. It's just a little lifting up nice and tall. We don't have to, hold in this overarching position. And I see a lot of women feel that way, like, oh, I have to do the opposite, but this feels really unsafe, like they're kind of flaunting around a little bit, and it's unnecessary. But unless that feel, again, as long as we don't get stuck in a holding pattern, that's when it becomes something you want to challenge. Okay, another thing that I wanted to mention with posture is that I don't have the organs in here right now because I've misplaced the bladder and I need to find it. And without one of the organs, it doesn't fit right. But imagine we have 3 pelvic organs, and if you are born with a uterus, whether you still have it or not, the bladder sits right here in front, and it helps support and hold up the uterus. And then that really, it's like this scaffolding system. They all support one another. And then you have your rectum. And they all kind of grow and shrink with time and, continue to support and hold each other up. And if you are born with a prostate, it's the prostate here at the bottom, and then you have the bladder and the rectum. Okay, so, and your pelvic bowl here is much smaller, usually, generally, typically, if you have a prostate. So they're pretty snug in here together. And when we're in this collapsed position, it actually, if you can see from the bottom here, it puts all the weight of not only the pelvic organs, but the entire upper body here on the pelvic floor. And I don't want to give you this idea that the pelvic floor is weak and can't handle it, because a vital and healthy pelvic floor can handle it. But when we hold a nice neutral pelvis, it actually allows these organs to gently rest on the back of the pubis, which is this front part of the pelvis. And you can even find that little bony spot on yourself. Whenever we hold this nice neutral position, they're supported by a bone structure and not just held up by the muscles of the pelvic floor. And so how do you know if you're sitting in a neutral pelvis, right? That can be tricky, because you might be one of this like overarching people where your rib cage kind of flares open and you pull your shoulders back and your pelvis is tilted way forward. And again, other way, the other side of the pendulum would be this really tucked and rounded, collapsed position. Usually the sit bones kind of collapse in closer towards one another, and it just makes it really hard to get that blood flow in. And if you're scissoring open this way, it can block a nice full breath. Our pelvic diaphragm likes to move in tandem with our respiratory diaphragm. That's another reason posture is so important. When we're sitting up, we have this nice, clear continuity for the respiratory diaphragm, which stacks on top of the pelvic floor diaphragm. And as you breathe in, they move together. And this is optimal for blood flow, lymph flow into the pelvic organs, to the pelvic floor, and it acts as a sump pump for blood flow circulation to the rest of the body as well. Things can pull up if we aren't exercising this posture correctly. So let's see, we've talked about this neutral pelvis, and this idea of a neutral pelvis, not getting stuck in patterns, why posture is important, and let's talk about how we know if we have a neutral pelvis or not. And you can do this with me as you gently tilt the pelvis forward. Notice the influence of the spine. You might notice the low rib cage kind of flares open. Take a breath here. Notice how it feels. Can you breathe all the way down into the diamond of the pelvic floor? This is the diamond, the front, the back, the side, the side. Okay, and now let's tuck in around the other way. So go ahead and curl in, think cat spine here, and breathe. Notice where the breath wants to expand, and see if you can breathe all the way down into this diamond of the pelvic floor. Okay, and now find somewhere in the middle between that cat-cow pelvis. You feel like the tailbone is nice and long. You're not sitting on the tailbone. You can even imagine you have a tail. That tailbone is gently draping over the back of your chair, your bolster, whatever you're sitting on. And now take a breath. And see if you can tune into this expansion of the pelvic floor. I like to imagine a trampoline expanding, or even a parachute. Sometimes a jellyfish undulating in the water as it swims. Whatever visual feels like it's helpful to connect to your body here. And notice the difference between this expansion in the different positions of the pelvis. So a few tricks to know if you have a neutral pelvis. And again, our body loves to move in all ways, and our hips can actually move in all sorts of different planes and has different ranges of motion, and we want to explore all of those. But for a neutral pelvis, again, it has that support for the organs on the back of the pubis. Whenever we have this nice neutral pelvis, it supports the natural curves of the spine, which we want. Those are important. It's like our natural little hydraulic system. So how do we know if our pelvis is neutral? So a couple of ways I like to use. And one is you can see this front hip point. It's called the ASIS. And you might find this on your body. Go ahead and take your hands and find your front hip point. Okay. Find it on each side. Okay. And get an idea or a sense of where your pelvis is in space. And also locate your pubis. So this is your body. If this is uncomfortable, then honor that. But you might also get curious and be like, why is this uncomfortable? So find that pubis, take a breath. And then with your thumb and your index finger, find the ASIS and the pubis. Okay, rock your pelvis forward and back. And notice how as you rock forward, the thumbs kind of move out in front of the fingers. And as you walk back, then the fingers are in front of the thumbs. And see if you can find this place where they're in an even plane. So the thumb is in the same plane. If I took a piece of paper or something flat, there's not one in front of the other. And this is a neutral pelvis. So this is something it can be easier to find if you're laying down, which I can show you here, and this might be helpful to try. As you lay down, take your thumbs, your hand, you can even make this little mudra here, or have the palms of your wrist, the base of the wrist on the ASIS, that front hip point, and then your pubis, and rock forward and back. On the inhale, as you press the tailbone down, feel the low back lift up away from the mat. As you exhale, the tailbone lifts towards the sky. Feel the low back press into the mat, and notice how your hands move. Notice this rocking forward and this rocking back. And now can you find this place where your hands are in one plane? It might take, depending on your proprioception, you might want to take a look and see if they're kind of even here. And notice how this feels. Notice the pressure in the back of the sacrum. What is pressing into the mat? Notice the lightness in the low back for that natural lordotic curve as it curves in. And then the kyphosis of the upper back as it goes back out and presses into the mat here. Relax your shoulders. And then notice your chin. Can you gently tuck your chin in like you're giving yourself the tiniest little double chin here? And notice how that lengthens the back of the neck, which is the cervical spine. And let's take a few breaths here and really tune back into this tandem movement of the respiratory diaphragm and the pelvic diaphragm, moving together like a jellyfish. As you inhale, that respiratory diaphragm vacuums air into the lungs and moves down into the belly. And see if you can breathe all the way into the diamond of this neutral pelvic floor. And then exhale, without any effort on your part, it all domes back up into place. Let's take a couple more just like that. Breathing deeply all the way down into the pelvic floor. And exhale, let it go. Last one. Great. You can come back up into a seat, and That's a great practice to add in as we kind of begin to come aware of our holding patterns, how we like to hold our bodies, and if we are stuck in any of these holding patterns, which again happens over really decades. You might have an imprint on your energetic body as a child, and you kind of round in to feel safe, and that kind of gets stuck. So it's those places that we gently want to begin to open up and find space, but it can take baby steps as our nervous system recognizes that it's safe to take up space. It is safe to open up. It's safe to sit up tall. So I want to invite you into this awareness by pick a time of day, and it's easier when you stack this with a habit or a ritual that you already have in place. Maybe if you have a consistent yoga practice, as you're settling into your practice and bringing your awareness into the present moment, into your body, this can be sitting down for a moment with your coffee in the morning. It can be at night right before you go to bed. Or maybe it's like a once a week type thing that you kind of pencil in and know that this is your time to kind of bring awareness around this. Whatever works, and that's different for everyone. You can find that nice neutral pelvis, and maybe you take some cat-cow first, whether that's seated, laying on your back, or on your hands and knees. You can do this in a chair, and just notice, tune into the position of your pelvis as it moves forward and back, and how that influences the spine. And then find a nice neutral pelvis. Feel how that tailbone, just really getting familiar with how this feels in your body to be here, creating that new holding pattern, a new familiar and comfortable place for your body to be. And take at least 5 breaths here consciously. Visualize the jellyfish, breathing all the way into the diamond of the pelvic floor, and just being with yourself here, telling yourself maybe an affirmation or maybe an I am safe to be here. I am safe to reside in my body. And then that's it. And really, that goes a long way. It really does. So please let me know if this was helpful, any aha moments you had. Feel free, if you have any further questions, I can answer those in the next live, and I can come back in. We can have more of a conversation and a chat. Ideally, I would like these to grow into something where it's a very casual chat back and forth, and I can answer questions. We can move through some movements together and see how it feels, so it can be a little more interactive. So thank you so much if you are here, and if you are watching the replay. I appreciate you being here, and I hope this was helpful. Let me know what you would like to chat about next. Have a wonderful day.